I want to tell the story of Esther just because it's so important as we approach Purim. Esther, we're doing a Talmudic Tobacco on Wednesday night about it. Esther is this great book where you've got this young woman named Esther, you got this drunk king named Hashwerosh, a pain in the head. And he's got a minister named Haman. And Ahasuerus, this drunk king, says to his wife, Vashti, I want you to go and dance naked for my ministers. And Vashti says, no. He says, you're going to have to dance naked for my ministers or you can't be queen anymore. She says, thank you, bye-bye. And she leaves. So he holds a beauty contest to find who's going to be the new queen. And Mordecai, who is the uncle or godfather or, whatever way he's got a relationship with Esther, like she's his ward, pushes her to go do it. And she wins. The rabbis over the last, especially the Eastern European Orthodox rabbis over the last 500 years, refuse to actually look at the text. They make comments like, oh, she won, but she really wasn't dancing or anything. She actually was a baby and her beauty seduced Ahasuerus. Or she was really, really old. That's a load of BS. The text says what the text says. Okay? And we need to stop being apologetic for it and instead learn to integrate it and how to use it. That's one of the things I really, you get these Orthodox Eastern European guys who are saying, oh, she was so pure. No, she wasn't. She was a woman. She was a young woman. Let's be honest. Mordecai pimped her out. Okay? Let's just be honest about it. He pushed his niece, his ward, to go do a beauty contest, to go be the wife of a drunken king. Mordecai refuses to bow before Haman. A number of other things happen as well. Haman convinces the drunken king that he should kill all of the Hebrews, all the Jews. And he signs this that it's going to happen on a certain date because Haman really hates the fact that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. So he convinces the drunken king, look, they're not your people, etc. And Mordecai goes to his niece, ward, whatever, Esther, and he says to her, you need to convince the king to not kill the people. And she goes, well, if I go there and I'm not, he hasn't summoned me, he might kill me. And Mordecai says, look, God's going to save the Jewish people one way or the other, and maybe this is why you were put in this position. So she says, ask all the Jews in Shushan, the town, to pray for me. And so they do for 3 days. And then she goes to the king, and the text is very explicit. Now, I want you to understand, in the text of any book in this, any verse in this book, we are taught traditionally there is not a word misplaced. There is not a word that should be there that is not there. There is not a word that is not there that should be there. Okay? So if the text says the rabbi was wearing a white hat and a green sweater, okay, and blue jeans, then it means the rabbi was wearing a white hat, green sweater, and blue jeans. Right? If it says that he's wearing a white hat, a green sweater, blue jeans, and tennis shoes, then it means that he's wearing a white hat, green sweater, blue jeans, and tennis shoes. And if it says he's only wearing a white hat, the rabbi is showing his everything. Okay? His massive biceps, whatever it may be, right? So what happens? And it's worth reading the actual text because people get very offended by this, but I'm sorry, the text says what the text says. And it's important to understand. Plus, Esther's his wife. Can she do anything she wants with her husband? It's okay, right? It's not like she's, well, no, if she wants to be with her husband, she can be intimate with her husband. And if she wants to manipulate her husband by being intimate with her husband, is that okay? Absolutely. You're going to tell me your wife never did that? You never did that?
Happens all the time.
Right? Okay, that's right. So here's what it says, and I'm going to read it very clearly. Esther put on her diadem, her crown, and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, facing the king's palace, while the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room facing the entrance of the palace. So first of all, he's sitting in his throne. She comes over here and she looks across from him. What is she wearing?
A crown.
The diadem.
What else is she wearing?
Doesn't
That'll
say.
be nothing.
Is that okay? Absolutely, it's a husband. Who cares? We don't need to make apologies for this. Stop taking the text and fitting it into some sort of constraint that is not accurate and not reflective of the brilliance and wisdom and depth of our teaching. So I'm just reading what it says. So now she's standing across. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. The king extended to Esther the golden scepter which he had in his hand. And Esther approached and touched this tip of the scepter. What troubles you, Queen Esther? The king asked her. What is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be granted you. So let's be clear about this. His naked wife shows up with just a crown.
She isn't naked.
All she says is she's wearing a crown. Text says what the text says, right? He says, and he's sitting there and he goes, humana. And he extends a scepter that happens to be in his hand. He extends it to her. She gets on her knees and she touches it. And he says, Esther, baby, whatever you want, I'll give you half the kingdom. You think it was a real golden scepter? Or do you think maybe that's a euphemism?
But then we're twisting the word.
No, we often use euphemisms. We don't twist words, but they're often euphemisms. When it says
Not a scepter.
when it says that God gets angry, it never says God gets angry in the Torah. Never. See, your phone agreed. Never says that. What it does say is that God's nostrils flared. God doesn't have an actual nostrils, but it says that because it's passionate. It's not about angry. It's about he gets passionate when our nostrils flare. Maybe it's a scepter. Maybe it's a scepter made out of metal and gold. Maybe it's a scepter of another type. But the bottom line is he extends the scepter. She touches it. And he goes, hey, baby, whatever you want. Text says what the text says. She says, I want to have a party. Just you, me, and Haman. And he goes, whatever you want, baby. If that's what you're into, sure, fine, we'll have a party. And so three of them have a party. And when the king gets up, what happens? The king gets up because he's drunk all the time. So he probably had to relieve himself or something, but he gets up. And she's on a divan, and the exact same language that was used long, long ago in the book of Genesis about Potiphar's wife accusing Joseph of trying to seduce her even when he didn't. Same exact language is used to describe what happens with Esther and Haman. She screams, the drunken king walks in, she says, he tried to rape me, he tried to rape me. It's the same language that is used. It's a recapitulation. That's why we spent the time on the story weeks ago. It is a recapitulation of that story of when Joseph was falsely accused. She falsely accuses Haman. Ahasuerus, for his part, is furious, and he decides he's going to impale Haman. That doesn't mean from the top, that means from the bottom up. Big stick. Boom. As well as Haman's 10 sons. Okay? And Mordecai becomes the chief minister, takes Haman's place. And what is the first thing that Mordecai does? He decides that they need to be proactive and attack all of the Persians. And he kills, I forget if it's 65 or 75,000 Persians on the same day that the Jews were going to be killed. And let me find the exact page. I really want to share with you what the exact number. I think it's 65 or 75,000, but I really don't honestly remember. When Mordecai gets in power, he becomes totally enamored with his own power. By the way, most Orthodox congregations in the world, certainly in this country, do not read this when they say they read the Gonz Megillah, the whole Megillah. They skip this particular part. They don't want to address the fact that this is what Mordecai does.
Yeah, Mordecai became a power-hungry guy.
Mordecai goes and destroys all of his foes. He kills, I want to say it's 75,000 Persians that he attacks preemptively. think it's either 65 or 75,000. I actually don't remember. So he did all this, and Haman dies, and Mordecai is in power, and Esther's the queen. Okay, let's be clear what this story is about. And first, I mean, just a little bit more. It's the holiday. It is this book associated with the holiday of Purim. We are taught that the only holiday that will still be observed in the world to come is the holiday of Purim. That's how powerful and important it is. The secret is found in the name Purim. If I asked you what's the holiest day in the Jewish year, most people would say
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. The full name of Yom Kippur is Yom HaKippurim, which literally means the day that is like Purim. On Yom Kippur, we go into the very depths of our souls and we cleanse to come out reborn. Every culture in the world, doesn't matter which indigenous culture it is, has a ceremony where they believe that they are collectively cleansing evil for the planet. That holiday for us is Purim. Because what happens in a traditional reading of the Megillah, now understand you're getting drunk the whole time, and we're going to get to why. But what happens in a traditional reading of the Megillah is when Haman and his 10 sons are impaled, the cantor has to sing it all in one breath. There are 22 words, there are 10 sons. There are 22 pathways and 10 points in our Jewish mystical tradition of the tree of life. So our Makabbalim, what we've learned and what we're taught is that on that moment, from the darkness of his drunkenness, the cantor, who is the shaliach, the messenger for all of us, chants out all 10 points, all 22 pathways, cleanses the world of the tree of knots to make a tree of life. In that moment, we believe we are literally cleansing.
Cleanses out the tree
of knots, the dark tree.
Oh, okay.
To make a tree of life.
Knots.
And it's pretty powerful. That's what this holiday is about. Because see, everyone, and we're supposed to get so drunk you can't tell between the blessings of Mordecai and the curses of Haman, which have the same numerical value, the two phrases. You're not supposed to be able to tell between day and night. You're supposed to be that excessive. Why? Everyone in this book is excessive, addictive, and a drunk. Whether they are drunk on alcohol like Ahasuerus, power like Haman and Mordecai, or sex and beauty like Esther. Everyone is excessive. And in this book, it is a book about addiction recovery, because that's what addiction is. It's excess without boundary. When you are fighting Amalek, when you are fighting evil, when you're fighting cancer, when you're fighting an addiction, you don't negotiate with it. You cut it out. So where do we see a positive role model? This is, by the way, is the only book where God's name is not mentioned in the entire Bible. His name is never mentioned. So where do you find God when God is seemingly absent? When everyone around you is drunk? When everyone around you is excessive? You find it in the very first part of the book. Vashti. You walk away. You don't negotiate with an addiction. You cut it out and you walk away. You don't negotiate with Hamas. You cut it out. You walk away. You don't negotiate with Amalek, Haman is supposedly descended from Amalek. You walk away. You destroy and walk away. You don't negotiate with it. You can't give an alcoholic one drink or a heroin addict one snort. Right? Can't do it. You cut it out. You walk away. And so Vashti is the heroine of this story. Everyone else is a negative role model because they're all excessive drunks on one way or another. So you got to be willing to go into it and step away from it totally. And that's why it's such a powerful holiday and such a powerful book.
So is Vashti the righteous one in the whole story?
Mm-hmm. If you read the text, Vashti is the righteous one. That's why Hera Peter Stowe also said she was the first feminist, the first women's rights person. If you listen to 98+% of Eastern European Orthodoxy today, they will tell you, oh no, she was horrible. And Esther's this wonderful model, this virginal savior. That's not what the text says. Okay, the text says what it says.
She's a liar too, on top of it.
The text says what it says. So the simple answer is Vashti says no when she's asked to dance naked. just won't play the game. And if you're in that place of excess, you don't play the game. That's why Purim is such a powerful holiday, so important in so many ways. It is a lesson on how we deal with excess, whether it's excess of drugs, alcohol, addictions to money, to power, to fame, whatever it may be, whether it's Amalek and Hamas or Haman.
There can
Just
be,
walk away from it.
You do not negotiate with evil. You do not negotiate with excess. You cut it out and you move on.
there's excess in the name of God too, as practiced by the current Muslim.
As practiced by many people
Yeah.
in different faith traditions. The point, and that's why it's the one holiday that we are taught will still be observed in the world to come, because even in the world to come, you could be excessive. You could be excessive. You know, I'm closer to God. I follow His commandments better than you do. I had this conversation with someone yesterday about a funeral. They said, "Can I do this? I really don't want to do this at the funeral." I said, "There's no mitzvah, please. You're not going to hell because you don't do it. We don't have that theology." The Book of Esther is so powerful. And the holiday of Purim is so powerful, and it is an answer to what is going on with Hamas and with evil. It is an answer to addictions. It is an answer of any sort that includes power, fame, substance. And it's all found in the Book of Esther.
So is this negotiation, and politics often fall under these categories of excess. And so the negotiation with Putin, is that anything like?
I kind of stay away from
excess?
politics as much as I can.
Yeah,
Here's what I will say. Last night, some people won a best documentary for film that was a piece of fiction.
Mhm.
yeah, I heard.
And they got up and they did, Orlando, you can find it. I wrote an article that I think was published about an hour ago on PJ Media. And they got up and they talked about their political views, and they castigated Israel and the United States as blocking for peace, and how all they want is peace, etc. It's all this BS. Okay? Now, I'm going to go under the assumption that when these filmmakers originally started making the film, maybe that's what they wanted, was to create something that would bring people together. But they started making that long before October 7th. They didn't release it till after. They didn't finish it till after October 7th. And they got up and they talked about all this stuff. And the Arab was saying, if only my people were treated well. All we want is peace. We never want anything else. It's BS. And the Israelis saying, if it wasn't for America that's blocking peace, we could have peace, and my friend's family, and we all just want to, we want to honor all this. Okay. I'll even go under the assumption that they believe that. And I don't think they do, personally. But I'll go under the assumption that they believe it. Here's what they didn't talk about. One of their close friends who had been involved in the development of the film in the very beginning of it was a guy named Chaim Katzman, blessed memory, who was killed in a kibbutz on October 7th. Now, if they really wanted to talk about peace, and they could have gotten up and said, our friend Chaim, who worked on this with us, was killed on October 7th, and that was not okay. And we need to both listen to each other and bring peace. There's a lot of things they could have done, but they have totally fallen into the excess of, they want a U.S. distributor because they haven't gotten one in a year. They want the fame, the money, etc. And they got a standing ovation at the Oscars. So it's easy to fall into the excess. And Mordecai was a good guy, right? But when he becomes in power, he too, power corrupts absolutely. So when you view it that way, it becomes an understanding of what to do around excess. And that's why it's such an important and powerful book.